like they were good enemies, but they were also fucking cheap and terrible enemies. And then also they have tons of iframes. They have tons of invincibility frames. So like there's once they start lunging at you, that's it. Like once they're in a grab animation, you're in a grab. Like so there's very cheap parts of their AI and their design to where it's just infuriating sometimes. Like I don't know how many times I've canceled a headshot. I've had it to where it's actually I get the headshot, but it's in a grab. It gives me the bullet back and still takes the grab. I'm like, the fuck is that? It's like
Yeah, it's like
you can even
the
just do
zero frame animation.
yeah.
It's like literally that's
It's
how
like
7
Capcom,
was
you
too.
make fighting games. You should know who should get advantage at what points.
Yeah, like you know these things, and it's just funny because you see in other games sometimes, like even in some of the like 2 and 3 remake, like if they're in a lunge, they clip through your gun, so you're shooting through their head. But that's one of the things. But it's like when it gave me my ammo back, I was like,
What?
what the fuck? So you just straight up was like, nope, you're screwed. We're gonna fuck you over right now. Like that was kind of like the line for me with the Lycans. I was like, this is bullshit. But
Yeah.
that means because like you're saying, the flying things are kind of squirrely, but the other enemies are just like cannon fodder. And then I guess part of this also connects into the Chris section. Like that's another section of the game where I could just be if we couldn't play it again, it'd be nice. Like the first time, okay, but then it's like you play it again, you're like, I know you're just overpowered and it's just a really long siege, but
I just don't know who they're trying to appeal to with those moments. I don't understand because Capcom, everyone hated those games when you made it that way. Like people hated 6, and that's what 6 is. People tolerate 5, but that's what 5 is, especially the latter half. Actually, probably the latter 3/4. So like you put a part that everyone was like, hey, we don't like this. We're so glad you went and changed it in 7. Keep it like this. We love it. Don't do anything, Capcom. Wink, wink. Stop. And then they're like, but what if we did it again?
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
then they always give you like an opportunity to be another character almost always. So it's like Ada or like Mia or whatever. So I was wondering when that was going to happen. I knew it was going to be Chris at some point, but I didn't know how. It was like more of an escape scene kind of thing, or like let's transition now that Ethan's dead for a little bit. We're gonna freaking put a bomb inside the freaking embryo.
Yeah.
Of
So it's like I
Mega
understand
mice.
I understand the function of the section and like how they do let you do the other character, but it's just like kind of what Jason's saying. It went to that gameplay towards like Resident Evil fans don't want this because even people I know who like 6 and 5 and that kind of style, they were like, yeah, this Chris section's stupid. Like it's just. It was one of those things because I always forget about it. Even on my second playthrough, and even when I watch like people doing runs of it now, I'm like, oh yeah, the fucking Chris section, like,
or like throws you into the DLC of 7, where it's like, here you go, here's something
Right.
fucking weird. Yeah,
because
that was weird.
the one fight that he does against the big guy is all right. Like,
I hate it.
the first time it was lame. Like I will admit that I hated it the first time because the shiny thing didn't work for me.
I just don't think it's once again a good design choice to have something that requires like aiming time in such a small claustrophobic area because that's not real fear or even gameplay, I guess. Like it's just you have to get lucky.
Yeah.
And then also the AI is dumb where it sits there for 20 seconds at certain points and it's just like feels so off.
Yeah, there's some weirdness about it. I will agree with that. But I mean, technically, that's kind of one of the highlights of his part, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is like, because the other part is just like, oh, you're mowing down Lycans with this fucking assault rifle and like his overpowered weapons in general. And then having to do it on the big Megamite seat when they just coming at you. And then you have fucking Lycans that are sniping you with arrows. Like,
impeccable aim.
Yeah. Like, that section I could really do without.
Like, love his handgun though. His handgun's dope.
Brutal, yeah. No, like his weapons are fucking good. Like that's why the first unlimited weapon I got was the assault rifle because it fucking mows shit down. Like it's no joke. Like he is super overpowered and like only he gets like grenades, like actual grenades. and those things rip. But like, I don't know, like that section, because then also like depending on where you go in that, because I always go to the right. I didn't even realize you could go to the left and there's more supplies.
Yeah.
That they come up behind you when there's nothing back there. They still spawn dudes from behind. It's like fucking dumb.
Yeah, if it was like a different
me,
mode, it would be fun. Because like when I first got it, it was cool. You're like, oh, okay, I can actually kill these things like in a few, seconds instead of like 15 rounds. But yeah, I totally agree with that because it's. I mean, I guess it had like this intensity thing and this like momentum of like let's escape. Like I said, an escape sequence, but they probably could have done it in a different way.
yeah. And I'm trying to think. I had some. Well, and then like some of the plot holes. Some of the things were kind of weird. Like it was cool how they just fucked Ethan up the whole time. Because they really did set you up to be like, we're fucking killing him. We said this was his last game. This isn't Chris. This isn't the guy who's never going to die and who somehow is like 60 years old and still buff as fuck. Like, no, like we're getting rid of Ethan. So they had a lot of cool body horror. But then the plot got a little weird towards like, oh no, Ethan died in the intro of 7 and he's just mold. Okay, so the mold, like he melded or something, and then it's like got his consciousness, or it's still kind of him, but he's molded. And then it's like, that was the whole thing, like with the baby. It's like, so what's up with the baby? So like he had like molded spunk, and it's just like, oh, here's a hybrid baby, and like, and then it's like we were talking about too. It's like, so then the baby just like melts kind of into the canisters. Like,
well, didn't it like get
crystallized
again? And then they broke it into pieces? And so then she has the magic to bring the crystals back together or something? Because it was all about crystals like the whole time.
Kind of. Right, you're right. Yeah. The crystals are throughout. That is something I didn't even think of once, Randy.
Yeah, neither.
Not once did I think of crystals. I truly had no fucking clue how they put a baby in flasks and then it comes back together.
Because I assumed it was like goo. Like,
well, yeah.
I'm thinking it was like fucking Ghostbusters 2, like pink goo.
Oh, ectoplasm or something. Yeah. Freaking. Well, yeah, because so, what was I thinking? So you said Ethan and the mold thing and him dying. So like, I was thinking maybe it was like the residents of the House of Seven. Like she infected them. They're dead, but now she can control them. But why isn't Ethan in control? Or taken over by Eva.
And so I thought about this too, and then I was thinking mostly from the aspect of Mia. I was like, well, wait, how is this even a thing if Mia was also infected? But I forgot that oh my god. She got the injection. She got the serum that saved her. And so she was no longer infected.
Yeah.
And so that is why she didn't die when Evie died, but then
wouldn't have Ethan
exactly.
And then
but then that's I think that's why they changed this idea of the Mutamycete and the Megamycete, because then essentially it's like Ethan is actually still just a part of this overall infection is the Megamycete, and so that's why he didn't die.
Yeah.
Because then also when you think about it, Zoe and Jack Baker don't actually die after Evelyn does, because Zoe's just crystallized.
Yeah.
And then Jack becomes the fucking Swamp Thing. So
well, and it's kind of off topic, but kind of on topic. I did know that he was infected, or Ethan was, because his arm got attached.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or his hand, I mean. Well, it's whatever. So obviously he was able to, heal up, and then, him shoving like goo into his mouth, intestines. But my other point about Ethan, is that what I was thinking in 7 is that Ethan wasn't really supposed to be a long-term character to begin with. I think he was a shell of you being immersed into this experience. And so I think they kind of got a little weird with killing him off because they knew that it wanted him to be extended throughout or past 8. which was kind of cool because that's why you never see his face too. I think that's another thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then you see his daughter's face, which I'm totally cool with extending her as a new character and building her up to be this cool, new hero kind of thing. So that was my point about that. I don't know if it makes sense, but that was my take on it.
Well, and that's a lot of things about 7 that we've talked about in the past. Like me and Jason kind of, I don't know, I think maybe with you is that like 7 felt like it didn't start out as a Resident Evil game. Is that it was like Capcom was making a first-person horror game, and then PlayStation was like, no, you're making a Resident Evil game for VR. Because Resident Evil 7 was a VR game, and then they made it into a main title game. So that's where you can see a lot of the scares and a lot of things that happened within Resident Evil 7. It is built specifically for VR, but works in a regular console environment. So then I totally understand why that idea with Ethan, that they're ready to kill him off, and he's their version of Link right now. It's like, oh, it's your link between you and the game.
Except at the same time, like, personally, Ethan's such a shit character.
I was gonna get that.
I don't want to think that that's me. Like, I don't feel linked to the character because I wouldn't steal the thing that I'm trying to, do to get my daughter back and be like, hey, bitch, I'm stealing it, you fucking ugly motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like,
Ethan is a shitty character, because I was about to bring that up, is that, like, you look at all the things, like, about Ethan's a dick, and he's not relatable. He's constantly whining, he's totally self-centered, and he's a fucking asshole. So it's like, what we talked about this with the villagers, is that they have the villagers in the beginning of the game, and they're not there for anything. They're supposed to be emotional weight, but they slaughter them right away.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh, hey, there's, like, 5 survivors. No, there's not. Like, there's no emotional connection and build-up actually with them. It's supposed to add weight to it, but it really doesn't. But then what's the first thing what happens is the house is falling apart and fucking Nicole Thompson died. Like, why is this happening to me?
why is this happening to me?
Like, fuck you, Ethan. Just, like, 8 people just died.
Ethan, you're wondering what's happening? You're the common denominator here, okay?
Yeah.
Like, you are the only one who's surviving these sort of situations. Maybe you should look at yourself.
And then, like, you see what he says about, like, with Moreau. It's like, he comes up, he's like, hey, dum-dum, look at you. He's like, he's hating on a mentally disabled guy. He's also physically disabled. Like,
and then the mentally disabled guy is like, guess what, you fucking idiot? Now you're trapped here because you kept talking.
Yeah.
Like, you ran your fucking mouth.
You pulled the monologuing. Yeah, it's like,
now my
Ethan's
mucus
an
is
asshole.
going to get your ass, but... That's so true. He is kind of a dick, and he's kind of... Maybe that was part of the thing. They're like, we know he's going to die. Let's not make people fall in love with him so that we don't get the wrath after we kill him off.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Because of all the, like, Resident Evil, protagonists, like, he is the most unrelatable and, like, worst one. Because, like, you feel for Leon, you feel for Claire, you feel for Chris in the first game, and, like, Jill, you have a real connection with Jill. But...
Even Sheva.
Yeah, like... And they did Sheva dirty, kind of. And then people hate Sheva now because they just had terrible partner AI. So it's like...
I hate her.
So, like, it's just it was really kind of weird, is that, like, Ethan was, like, really not the best character. But, I mean, it kind of, now you don't really care that he's dead. And they try to add some emotional weight to it. It's like, oh, we did all of this to save his daughter.
Yeah,
but,
Father's Day, every day. So freaking hard.
Yeah.
No, but it's... I don't know. It still had some emotional weight at the end. I think it was kind of cool, but I totally get that. But and I do like how they tied in the daughter. I'm super happy that they had that in there.
Yeah.
Because they could have easily just did some sort of text and say this is what happened 10 years later. But what it was, like 18 years later.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know, yeah, because that's the whole mystery about it.
Yeah, they don't actually give a time frame of how long after the fact.
Because
they don't do any sort
baby.
of overlying text being like 8 years later, and they don't put any years on Ethan's grave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're being very ambiguous. I think they're being ambiguous about the date. That might not be the case.
Because I think there's...
I tend to think it is ambiguous because of the stuff that we learned from 7 with the rapid aging of Evie.
Yeah.
That maybe this is only 2-3 years after everything that happened, and Rose is looking like an 18, 21-year-old girl, but she's actually only 3 years old.
And that's why she has, like, the Secret Service detail. with snipers on her head, like, because
that
I think
guy's a
they're
dick too.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I'll
well,
kick
know.
your
and
ass.
I think they're kind of building up her to maybe be even the next enemy, not even the next hero kind of thing. Because
Oh.
if she's that powerful, like what it could be like, oh well, Umbrella was still connected anyways, and I'm the best.
The female nemesis
Yeah,
freaking has
so
dentures.
I could see that being a thing, but
I just think like I agree with you, Randy. I think that I liked how they did the end and they like had that post credit scene with Rose, but I also just like am done with the Winters. Like I fucking hate Mia. I just don't see her purpose, and I can't believe that she was just alive in a cage.
in the basement.
Like that for some reason she deserved to live for however many years because we actually don't know when Mother Miranda came in. I guess it would have had to been after the baby was born, so it couldn't have been that long.
And
But then
she's in
also
there
it's like,
clean blouse, not even dismembered. Like what the hell?
well, it's like,
Yeah,
and then
I know.
she has the same exact clothes from Miranda did in the beginning, so it's literally the same model.
Yeah.
It was just like
Lazy.
Yeah, that was kind of lazy. It's like, oh, hey, Chris, how you doing?
I know.
I'm in the cage.
Yeah, I'm just. I've been here this whole time. No big deal.
No one's
just-
fed me for 3 months, but I'm here.
I've just been on my iPhone the whole time. Like what the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah, I don't know.
Your
I just
iPhone
like.
is-
I'm so. Yeah, I'm so done with those characters that it's like, cool. Rose looks cool. I actually think like as a character design, it's fine. She's fine, but like. Also, they've done this thing. They've done this already with like a kid of an infected. We got that with Jake and Wesker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a repeated theme kind of thing. Because, I mean, you even had Sherry. Like,
Yes.
she wasn't fully infected, but she comes back. Like, it's a lot of, like... Again, I think it's Capcom kind of started running out of ideas, and it kind of transitions to what I want to talk about next, is that all these connections to Resident Evil 4. Is that I think they kind of painted themselves in a couple of corners, and then they haven't announced it yet, but Resident Evil 4 is not happening. Like, because this game is like, it was a good game, but to me, it felt like a tech demo for 4. Is that almost all the major mechanics from Resident Evil 4 are in this game. I mean, you've got the merchant, you've got the inventory system, you've got the treasures, you've got money, you've got the fucking crows that drop shit. Like,
The little gems that you shoot out of the
yeah.
stone and whatever.
You have the map. Like the map is identical to what the map is in Resident Evil 4. Like, and I know that that's something you can say about every Resident Evil game, but I'm talking about like the actual aesthetic of it. Like, it's like a fucking pirate's map or some shit.
Yeah.
Like, it is the same aesthetic as what you get in 4.
You got the barricades too. I mean, you got all
Yep.
these things.
the sieges,
it's just like,
yeah.
you're not fooling anyone, Capcom.
Yeah. And that was the thing, is like, there were so many similarities. Even the setting, like, geographically and visually, like, it was, there's so many things, like we said about Moreau earlier. It's like, hey, look, big fish. Like, and then the factory felt very much like the island. It's like, there's a lot of signaling, I think, that kind of happened in that, to where I think Capcom is also afraid of new games. That's why they kind of did the sections of different lords being different styles of horror, because I think they really want to open up Resident Evil to just be a horror franchise and step away from the lore. I think they're trying to close out that's why I don't get why they didn't kill Chris. Is that they're not gonna they're trying to close out this kind of idea what they have with Resident Evil, but they just won't fucking kill Chris. But because they haven't touched Claire, like they haven't really touched Jill again. I mean, because they fucked up Jill in 5. Like, I think Capcom has painted themselves in a corner. They don't know how to quite get out. And then this game, in a way, was their way of doing that, but also signaling it's like, hey, to all you people who loved 2 remake and 3 remake, 4's on the way, we swear. Because like a lot of this game definitely felt like just signaling to 4.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything about it too. Like the upgrading the weapons, the attaché case, like everything about it is 4.
Yeah. And it's weird. Like, I was in a stream yesterday, and I was kind of talking about this, And this guy just like, I guess, hates 4. But like, I know that was so weird. It was like the streamer. It was in Matt Drock's channel, and he was kind of giving the guy shit. He's like, "Yeah, this guy just doesn't like 4, blah blah." But like, he's like, "I don't see any connection to Resident Evil 4 with this game whatsoever." And then I know, and I listed off just half of what we just talked about, and he's like, "I still don't see it." It's like, I don't know how, if you've ever played Resident Evil 4 and then played this and not seen those.
Yeah, that's just what you're signaling to me is you just never played Resident Evil 4 and
Yeah.
you just decided you wanted to say that you hated it instead of saying, oh, I've actually never played it. Because if you can't see the similarities between Village and 4, I don't have words.
It's a first-person 4. I mean, is that, that's pretty much what it is.
Which they did announce that they're doing. So, like...
that's what I was going to say. And I think it's kind of good that they did this Village like this, because it's kind of like a trial run to make sure they get all the kinks worked out, get all these cool things going, see what people didn't like. It's just kind of trial.
And what's interesting actually about Village is, and I'd heard this from some people who, like, I watched a streamer who knew some people in the development process, and Resident Evil 8 supposedly was actually supposed to be Revelations 3. And then because it was going so well, they co-opted it and took it over, and then it became the mainline franchise, or a part of the mainline franchise. But the idea was there was going to be a lot of focus on these witches, and I think that's kind of where the sisters and Lady D kind of came into it. And then instead, they kind of took it a different direction. But internally, Resident Evil 8, I believe, was actually just supposed to be Revelations 3. Which works. It kind of goes into what you were saying about like them doing offshoots of different horror things instead of it being so tied into this overarching narrative. Rather, they can just have these one-offs or these trilogies or whatever they want to do. And that's kind of how Revelations work to a certain extent.
And it kind of fits that idea of 7 not starting out as a Resident Evil game. Is that 8 didn't start out as a mainline title, but it became one. And it's just a lot of those interesting things to see, where I think Capcom gets pressured. Because, I mean, when you think about Resident Evil 3, the original, that was a side game. That was basically going to be a DLC. And I'll never stop talking about it. Fucking Code Veronica is the true Resident Evil 3. Even though I fucking love Resident Evil 3, I'm not shitting on it at all. But it was just because PlayStation was like, no, we get mainline titles. No one else. And that's actually what kind of, I think, soured their relationship a little bit, and because they moved to GameCube for a while, and they got shit about that, whatever, that section of Resident Evil history and behind the scenes. But I think that really kind of changed things in the Resident Evil world, and because 3 was 2.5, and Veronica gets a bad rap because it was really the transition into 4. Both narratively and mechanically. But I think that's kind of that one of those common things we're seeing with some of the Resident Evil stuff, and how like they did a lot of ideas and they're trying to change things. That was my main gripe with 6, is like, other than the gameplay, I can get used to the gameplay. It was jarring for me. I don't enjoy it, but I can deal with it. The gameplay wasn't a major issue with it. It's just like the bastardization of Resident Evil for me. And I didn't even play all the campaigns, but it was just like they were trying so many different things, like, because each campaign was different. The enemies are all fucking weird, and they just didn't. There was no true vision. I feel in that game of like, I need to complete the other campaigns to really see and all that. But it's just like Leon's campaign, like, what, dude? I've been saying this over and over again, but it's like, oh, he's a fucking saber-tooth tiger zombie. Oh no, he's a fucking T-Rex zombie. Oh no, he's a big fucking bug. Like, what the? They try to put so much stuff into this fucking game that they have no direction, and it's just like, it's just Resident Evil. Buy it. Like, we're just gonna slap the characters in there and the name on it and just call it good. And that's, I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. Because I mean, you see other franchise did it, like was it Dead Space? Got out of hand on Dead Space 3. It's like other developers do this, and it fucks them over. It kills franchises, and they're actually, like, Resident Evil 6 almost did kill the franchise, because even though it sold really well, it blew up in their face a little bit. It's like, oh, we made a shit ton of money, but people fucking hated it. So they didn't do anything with Resident Evil for a while because they couldn't. So I don't know. I think this game almost did that, but they nailed the sections well enough that it didn't. But I think it's kind of that signaling towards like we don't know what we're gonna do. We're just throwing darts and hoping shit works.
Right. From a narrative perspective, it seems completely clear that they don't know what the next direction is, besides leaving this cliffhanger of whatever the fuck Rose is. Like, truly, they don't have any clear direction. And because they can't, fucking kill Chris, like, because they can't fathom the idea of doing this, killing the worst protagonist in all of Resident Evil. Like, it just shows that they're going to keep kind of falling into this cycle until they really either. A lot of people think that they should just restart, which would be hard because they've done remake 2, 3, and not 4.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's this weird thing of, like, how do you go back to the first one when you've remade every one before it, unless they do want to go somewhere different narratively altogether. But that's also a minefield, right? Like, how do you get rid of the T virus when that is literally iconic? I remember in high school, my English teacher made a reference to the T virus and Umbrella, and she does not know anything about video games. Zero. And I just remember being like, what? What? So, like, it's one of those things where it's like they've painted themselves into a corner where they can't go back and remake it, and so are like reinvent it.
Yeah.
It almost needs to be what you're suggesting, where it's these little offshoots within the Resident Evil world.
Well, it's tough because like they knew that, and they've always said this, like we pride ourselves on not doing the same game 2 times in a row, and that. But they also do sometimes come back to the old ones, but they never really quite made it back to 2 or 3 or Veronica, which would be kind of cool. But how would you do that? Like, can you make the next game, or not 4, but the next game more like 2, where it's slower paced, a lot more kind of interweaving puzzles and things that you have to do in that environment? I don't know. Like what do you think?
It's hard for them too, right? They've created this perception of the game now as like, yes, there's survival horror, but you're also shooting a bunch of shit. Whereas when you play the original Resident Evil, like, or even RE Remake, like, it's not about that. Mm-hmm. The main purpose of that game is solving puzzles.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not really engaging in combat besides if you choose to, but then there's the, caveat that you get worse enemies later. Mm-hmm. And then, besides some boss fights, like, the true purpose of Resident Evil was, like, really just a puzzle game.
Zombie management, puzzles, and, like, just exploring and
exploration.
Having
mm-hmm. Yep.
And they did, like, they do it really well, and I think they tried that with 7. And I've only really played through 7 once completely, but I've played the first half of the game like 5 times. But like, I think they did that well enough in 7 to where they signaled that they were going there, but then they made that mistake. Because the same thing they did it with 4 is Veronica and 4 kind of shifted, even 3, like, to more action oriented. Like, it was a slow transition, but like 4 still worked as a survival horror game, but it had more action elements. It was set up completely different, because that's another thing they copied from 4 in 8 is their semi-Metroidvania. So it's like you go back to this one hub area, but those other areas are now closed off because they're chaptered out. Like, that chapter's over. You don't fuck with that anymore. Don't look over here. Like, so they kind of made that thing, and then it went off the rails of 5, because like 5 now going back is rough. Playing it solo, I did not enjoy it as much as I hoped I would. Because when I played 5 growing up, you and me, Randy, played it co-op. I remember that game as a co-op game, and it's fun co-op, like, because you're working with someone who's competent, and you can work together. Because that's the thing, but the player AI in that game is just terrible. And it's not that Sheva's terrible, because when you're Sheva and it's just Chris's AI, it's still terrible. Like, it's not like it's sexist or whatever anyone wants to say, or like Sheva's bad. It's like, no, it's just like their partner AI is dumb. Like, it just doesn't function correctly, because that game was made to be co-op. And like, even when they had the terrible split screen, it was made to be co-op. Like, I know one of yeah, I remember that. That was bad, but it still worked. As bad as that split screen was, you still played that game co-op and you had a good time. So, but it was way more action oriented because they started going like the Gears of War route, as it was right in that kind of time where it's like, oh, everyone wants these action shooters, and they thought for some reason that survival horror kind of fell off. And I mean, you can kind of see that in trends in games now. Like, I mean, The Medium came out, but I haven't finished that game, and I don't know. I can't speak to it. But like, Silent Hill fell off. Like, no one kind of gives a shit about any of the new Silent Hill games. It's all 2 and 3, and then everything after that's like, just remake 2. Like,
yeah, they started doing all these weird action events and different things that, like, I don't know. But yeah, just to bang this drum again too, with like from 2 to 3 becoming a little bit more action based. I felt like it. I don't know if this is a stretch, but it made sense for Jill because she's like now seasoned. She's now a little more badass too, so she knows what she's doing. She's got she's got focus, and she's gonna go kick some ass.
Top and skirt.
Yeah, dude, and she's got her. I mean, not even like even replaying a little bit of the RE3 remake. She's like ready to freaking kick some ass, and she's been doing her research.
Yeah, narratively it works. It's just that 5 and 6 went off the deep end.
Yeah,
specifically
it's like,
6, but like
come back a little bit.
Because I mean, 4 worked that way too. Because it's 8-10 years later. Leon's now in the Secret Service. Like, this is his thing. Like, his career started off in Raccoon City when the shit went down. So like, obviously he's good at what he does. He knows what he's doing. He's seasoned. It works out. I mean, even technically 5 works in a sense with Chris. It's just that it went from like, oh, like Leon is capable to boulder punching asshole. Like, so that it went off. It started going off the rails in 5, and then kind of continued. And then 7, they reeled it back in a little bit. And then I think they made that mistake again in a sense with 8. Not because I do like 8. It's just that it's that Chris section specifically, and then also kind of the Heisenberg stuff, because you have that when you go into like
we
an
didn't
area.
even talk about the whole section before the factory, the stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that actually is just another siege part, but you actually have weapons this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that part's completely unfun. I do like, even though the gunplay in Resident Evil 8 is good,
mm-hmm.
it's still just not a very fun sequence. I do like the boss fight when you do that one with the I can't remember what it's
Hammer
called.
dude.
But it starts with the
it starts with the
or
U.
whatever.
Well,
but
yeah. I was just gonna say that one part before that, which is really difficult. It's basically a Doom arena. If you look at it, it looks like Doom. So it's the little things like that. You got some barrels.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you don't have jump pads to take you to different.
Yeah, you can't move at all. You're just like, everything chases you down.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So, but that's kind of like what it was going for. Is that like you have? That's where it's a tale of 2 games. Is that first half of the game really nails your beats with a Resident Evil survival horror game, and then it's like, oh, but we're gonna be 6 again. We're getting there. Don't you worry. Like, to where I think they're trying to appease a section of the fans. I mean, because that's the thing, is that Resident Evil is a divided fan base, because you have people who were born in the 2000s that their first Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 6. So that's what they know as Resident Evil. To where us 90s and 80s children are like, no, like Resident Evil 2 and 4 are like that. That is what Resident Evil is. Those 2 games you cannot beat. Those are the God games. Like, and that's what's so hard, because we're going to talk about in a minute about kind of ranking games. It's like, it's so hard to see that change and that shift and divide in the fan base. So like with a game like this, to where the first half of the game is for these people, the second half of the game is for these people. So it's kind of hard. I see that for the developers to try to figure that out as well.
And what's hard too is that it's kind of deceiving, because the technical and design abilities have risen so high that you can freaking paint a turd pretty damn appetizing. Like, I mean, there's some just things that they can do that was like, it was still pretty fun, like I enjoyed it, but it was still shitty.
And like you said something about it too, John, earlier, about like just the different parts of the different lords of the game. And like, if you really think about it, like the castle with Lady D is Resident Evil 2.
Mm-hmm.
Beneviento House is Resident Evil 1 remake. Like, you're solving puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what it is. It's much more condensed, but that is what it is. And then you're being chased by a giant baby. I don't know. Moreau's is kind of tech demo for 4. Like, it's a bit more action oriented, but there's still some puzzle aspect and like traversal. And then the factory plus stronghold is 5 and 6. Like, that is what it is. And so I wonder if like that was almost Capcom being like, so what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing next. So can you guys tell us which ones you liked and didn't like, please? Then they're also going to be like, so why did you love Chris's part? Yeah, and then everyone's going to be like, we didn't. And they're going to be like, okay, I'm hearing you, but it was still your favorite part of the game, right?
Yeah. It's like, so you hated Chris's part. So Resident Evil 9, Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
But yeah, because it was kind of like the greatest hits. Is that you had elements from all the different games, which is cool. And like, it's kind of like, that's why they leaned way hard into the nostalgia and other things. Like, they had the boulder punching asshole line. There's a document that references Kendo's brother, which I was talking about yesterday too. Cause I'm like, did Kendo actually die? Because there's like, oh no, it was his brother. So like they reference a bunch of stuff that's happened, and then you have Spencer and like talking about Umbrella, and that's what leads directly into fucking Raccoon City. So they did those things. It was the greatest hits, and they tied things together. But it's kind of one of those things. It's like, are you gonna do what made you great, or are you gonna do what people hated? Because that's what's hard about this game too. Is it sold 5 million copies out the gate. So Capcom is like, fuck yeah, money. They love Chris. Like that. Like that's like that's the thing. Because that was the thing, is they used Chris was the hype of this game. Is that
he was, and he's in it for so little. If you think about it, yeah, he's in this game. I mean, like, it's actually crazy that he's on the cover of this game, and you see him at the beginning. You see him in Moreau's section, and then you play as him.
Yeah, that's it. Like, he fucking pops 5 into Mia, you see him for a second, and then it's his section.
Like,
and
he's like yelling at Chris. His buddy?
Yeah.
Remember when you're like, no, okay, yeah.
That's it. But I mean, they hyped him for this game because they showed you all his cutscenes basically in the trailers. Is that, oh, he's shooting Mia. Oh, he punched you through here. It's like, they showed you pretty much all of Chris in the trailer to be like, yo, it's Chris. Like,
well, and then some of the hype was like, oh, maybe he's freaking a Lycan, or he's a freaking, there's a clone of him. I've heard that one, where you're going to kill Chris, but then he's not really Chris, and then Chris pops up and says, just kidding, I'm here.
The good old Ada Carla Radame twist from Resident Evil 6. Landed so well, Capcom.
Yeah. But I mean, because that was funny too, is that they're really trying to focus on Chris again, because they don't have no idea what to fucking do with him, and they won't kill him because he's completely different in 7, he's completely different in 5, he's completely different in 6, he's completely different in this. Like, and then he was Carlos. He's basically Carlos in this game. And they gave Carlos a haircut and made him white, and because it's his same voice actor, and from 3, and it's and the models are fairly similar. It's like they made a white Carlos, and it's like, Chris, come on.
He's even more badass than in 7. In 7, he was kind of like this like washed out version of what Chris, like almost like a weird character model.
Yeah, that was the worst character model of him by far.
He's like, hi,
like,
come with
even
me.
Though roided out Chris isn't great, like, that was so weird, because really, when he takes off the mask, I think that it's like, you would hope it'd be like oh shit, it's Chris, and then you have to wait for him to be like, the name's Redfield.
It was like that shitty like Ninja Turtle toy that you got from like the thrift store instead of like the actual one. It was the knockoff Chris. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, I think they're trying. Again, it's the throwing the darts. It's like, oh, there's Chris. Oh, the greatest hits. What do you guys like? What do you want us to do? remake Veronica.
Throw in the darts with like awesome marketing, like
Yeah.
let's get them all stirred up, let's get the Reddits going crazy, let's get basically like just a Shark Tank full of blood.
They've also proven to themselves that these isolated settings work better for them than these global ones. Because like 4 is the anomaly in that, in which they did such a good job with the locations that it worked out fine, even though people still have their gripes about them. People still don't like the castle and people don't like the island. I like a lot of that game, so it doesn't bug me. But then in 5, they're going from place to place. And then from 6, they're going from country to country. So like they kept expanding and expanding. And so finally with 7, they're like, let's localize it again. Let's bring it to a mansion, a swamp mansion, because we have to be in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And that worked out so well. And then you go to the ship and it's fucking bad.
Yeah.
Like,
it's that third act.
They just always do that, as you said before. And so like, I think the direction for Resident Evil is moving back to this isolated thing. I just don't think they think they can do that. I think that they think they have to keep going bigger and better. And that's just not a necessary direction.
Yeah,
it's the same thing
when
with the
like
movies.
Circle back and bring you, like they take you away from the place that you started and then they bring you back. That was really cool in 7 where like, oh shit, you open this door and you're like, this is where this came from? Like there's this mine underneath, or even like RE2 where they take you away for a little bit and then you bring you back. I like that. I love that.
And it's so nonsensical and stupid. Like I was watching someone play Resident Evil 2 and they were like, why would it be just common knowledge that even though the RPD used to be a museum, that there's medallions that you have to put into a hidden thing that leads you, like, that is so nonsensical and dumb, but it works. Same with the mansion just being this weird convoluted mansion.
Yeah.
Like it works. It's fine. It doesn't have to make sense. But when you start thinking about that too much and then expanding upon it and going into these other areas, then you just lose it.
Yeah, because it works in those isolated, in small areas. Because it is that suspension of disbelief, and like it is ridiculous, but it works. Because it's like a video game. It's like because you're in that video game mentality. Because that's how things work. It's like Zelda dungeons. It's like when you really think about Zelda dungeons, a lot of those things are very convoluted and dumb. But that's how games work. So it works out. Exactly. And you have that suspense of disbelief. But when you do get too big, it's like, this is ridiculous. Because that's another part of 5 where it went off the rails. And they made the questionable choice of killing Africans. Like, that was a big thing. But, like, because 4 worked, too, because it was still kind of localized. And, like, I have gripes about the castle now in 4 just because I've played it so much. And I go back, it's just like, oh, yeah. Because some of it feels rough. Like, the aiming on console is fucking rough. I'm not gonna lie. 4 is an amazing game. I love that game. Top tier. But playing it again on console, like, aiming sucks. It's fucking terrible. But, so it's like some of those, how the castle's set up room. Oh, it's like, oh, this room again. Oh, this room. Oh, I remember this room. So it's like, when you first play it, the experience is good. And it's a good game. It's just like going back playing it sucked. Parts of it sucked. But like when you do 5, it's just it feels relentless and it's not as fun. It doesn't feel smooth. And then 6 was just a fucking arcade game that they made into a Resident Evil game. Like the combat in that was so bad.
I just think like really they would nail the formula if they were able to do something like 2, 3 combined. And I think that they could easily get away with something that would make sense like that in terms of a narrative, where being like, Raccoon City is only known because Umbrella, and Umbrella actually has this giant lab. And so they've actually designed the whole city, and that's why it's puzzle-like and there's weird doors and things like that. Like, I think that is the sweet spot where it's bigger, but it's still localized to a specific location instead of being like, we're going to fly from Washington all the way to China, and there's gonna be a tit monster that releases a gas that turns everyone into zombies.
Yeah.
Like,
it just gets... you can, and then you can.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, people, that is Resident Evil 6.
That is. No lie, that is.
It's a monster.
It is. It's fucking, and it's a terrible fight. It's a fucking Resident
The
Evil.
two times
I
you
watched
fight
you
it.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, because and they kind of started that in Veronica. It's one of those things like even though Veronica is so overlooked, it kind of opened the door to all these things because Veronica had the dynamic camera, which changed up how Resident Evil played on a fundamental level, and had a little bit more action stuff. Not much, not as much as like 3 and some of the like the live decisions, but like there's a lot more guns in it and there's variety. But also the locales, like you're on the island and then you fly to the Antarctic base. And so there's some of that. They started some of that international stuff. And then the game technically starts out, I think, in France, which they used the cutscene from the beginning of that and put it into the second Resident Evil movie, where the helicopter fucking lighten up the building, Claire running down the hallway. That's from Code Veronica, and they used it in Apocalypse. But I think it still worked because it still felt like Resident Evil, and they did a lot of the Resident Evil things with it. So, I don't know. It's one of those things, because it is really that division of what kind of Resident Evil fan are you? Because early Resident Evil fans love survival horror. Late Resident Evil fans want to play Gears of War. Like, so, like, it's kind of like,
Well,
and
no
anyone who watches this,
too.
don't take that wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I see the good things in these games. It's just, it is a divide.
I mean, can they do both? That's the question. Can they have like? I mean, do they? I mean, after 8, they have a shit ton of money. They should be able to have a big enough team to maybe do some of these other things. Because like you could do small super horror games, kind of like that horror house, whatever you want to call it, haunted house. But I'm being crazy. But I could see them being able to do that if they could, because they do have to compete with freaking Outlast and all those other crazy
See,
ones.
like Outlast 2 is not well received, and so that's why we haven't really heard much.
Or
from
not compete like they are better than
Yeah.
them. I'm just saying they have to be in that world, I guess. They like because
yeah, I think the scary thing about Capcom is when Capcom gets money, that's when they start fucking up. And so Capcom is in a really good place because Resident Evil sold amazing. Monster Hunter World was a huge success because it's commonly a success in Japan, but Western audiences usually didn't care about Monster Hunter. And then Monster Hunter World came out and the world nutted everywhere. It was everyone loved it. It was crazy. And so that became a really big deal. And then because of that, Monster Hunter Rise, which is only on the Switch, has sold way beyond what they projected. I think they were saying they thought it was going to sell 3 million units after a year and a half, and it's already sold 3 million units. And it hasn't been out for 6 months. Mm-hmm. So like they are getting money. Capcom is going to have money now. And this is where the scary moment of this is when they start to fuck up. Because they had money after 4 and 5, actually. 5 as well. And so it's like, what are you going to do, Capcom? Like, what?
Yeah, it's like, how are you going to handle this success?
Yeah.
Because Capcom really, and they should look at it almost like Nintendo, is that there's platformers, but there's Mario. There's no competition there. Like, there's other, like, those other platformers compete with themselves. Jak and Dexter, fucking Crash Bandicoot, Banjo-Kazooie. They fight. But then there's Mario. It's fucking Mario. Yeah. Same thing with Zelda, is that how many Zelda clones are there? There's always been Zelda clones.
Phoenix
but
Rising.
There's those games that, exactly. I mean, there's tons of Zelda clones, and it's been that way since NES. But there's those games, and then there's fucking Zelda. Like, Nintendo doesn't have to compete. That's why the console wars don't matter to them. It's like, no, you will pay $350 for a Mario machine. You will pay $350 for a Zelda machine. I am going to pay $450 for a new Zelda machine. It's going to happen. They don't have competition. It's there. Capcom should think of it like that with some of these franchises. Because when you think about Capcom, it's like you have Resident Evil. There's Resident Evil, and then there's other horror games. Silent Hill was there for a while with them to add some competition, but then they fell off. And then Resident Evil tried to be Gears of War. And it's like, why'd you do that? It's like, you're Resident Evil. And then you look at it, Mega Man. There's platform shooters, and then there's fucking Mega Man. And they fucked up Mega Man for a while. There's fighting games, and there's fucking Street Fighter. And then they fucked that up for a while too. It's like,
yep.
Well, and like, see, even like Capcom in terms of the fighting game world is just crazy too, because they had so many franchises. Like, obviously, Street Fighter is huge. It's huge, but like they did fuck it up for a while. They actually are just now recovering from that fuck up with 5. But like they also have Marvel vs. Capcom and all the Marvel licensed fighting games. They had Rival Schools, which wasn't big in the US, but it was still a big fighting game. Darkstalkers, Capcom. You're not watching this, but Darkstalkers, like they had the monopoly of fighting games too. So it's like they couldn't even compete with anyone because they were only competing with themselves. Like I don't understand it when there is nothing else like Resident Evil. There really isn't. There was Silent Hill kind of, but like
but when you look at a lot of the games that kind of were successful in the genre, the Resident Evil knockoffs, Silent Hill was very heavily influenced by Resident Evil. They switched it up a little bit. They added their own flavor. Silent Hill 2 was great, but it's still below Resident Evil. You're like, oh, I see how they did this because it's like Resident Evil. Like, you don't have that competition. That's like so we can kind of segue it into what we want to talk about, like tiers of Resident Evil games. But like with Resident Evil 2, you can't make a better survival horror game than that. You just can't. I don't care what you say. There is no evidence you can present to me that will tell me that there's a better survival horror game than Resident Evil 2, both original and remake. Like, that is what that does. There is the perfect mixture, because one, like, HD Remake and the original nailed the survival puzzles and everything. They really did. And then you had that extra element in Resident Evil 2. The combat got a little bit better. They added the stalking mechanic, and like the bosses were a little bit more there. It's like that is the perfect mixture of a game for that kind of style. And like 4 was amazing. 4 was that perfect transition and has those elements of more action, third person over the shoulder. Like it serves its purpose. It's a great game, but it's like it was that action survival. But if you want a survival horror game, fucking Resident Evil 2 is it.
Yeah. I mean, they must have been just geniuses of the hallways, the rooms, the way that you have to. They're obviously thinking about which way you need to go, and obviously after you beat it, you can figure out new ways to do it, like how to collect things ahead of time, so you're just banging things out. But the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then of course, like, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like adapting the police station from a museum, which is I think that was freaking cool as hell. I love that.
So cool.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. No fucking sense whatsoever. And like, it makes no sense that there's a statue that you have to put a hand in that you found over here to get a jewel because it's holding a scepter, and this jewel is actually opening a jewelry box that's in the interrogation room, but it's fine because it has a button in it that you can then open the locker. Like, that's not really how it is. But
it is. But what's funny about that idea is you think about how ridiculous that is. That is escape rooms. There's a whole industry that's based off of Resident Evil. That's not video game.
And so, like, that's where it gets really hard when talking about actually ranking Resident Evil games, because it's clear which ones are the top tier ones. Like, it's so clear. But then there's so many different nuances, and then they're also so different between them that it's so hard. Like, it depends on who you are, and it also depends where you're at. Like, when you just said it, I remember that I created a document on my computer of like what I think are the top 10 games of all time. And I have 3 Resident Evil games on there. And in the order that they appear, I have it as Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and then Resident Evil. But I don't know if I necessarily believe that right now anymore. But it's just like, there are so many different small aspects of these 3 different games that are so good that you can't, I don't know. It's so hard to say. And like they all itch a different, itch a different scratch a different itch, whatever.
Yeah.
Like Resident Evil is the perfect escape room horror game, right? Because that's all you're doing is it's all puzzles with like some small combat here and there. But then 2 is a really good combination of that where you're getting the scary aspect of it a lot more. You're getting better gunplay and things like that where you actually get to have fun playing like an action game, but then you're still doing a fucking escape room because that's what it is. And then 4 is just like action fun, but also really some good puzzles, and atmosphere is really good. I don't know. It's really hard. It's such a hard thing. And I think what makes me like 2 and Remake a little bit more is, especially since I've gotten to do it now, is this idea of the randomizer. Because I think what makes those games so good is when you're figuring it out for the first time, especially that sense of discovery when you're unlocked a room in the other side of the map and then you get something and you're like, no fucking way, this is the crest that I get to put in that thing. Yeah. Or when you get an item and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And then you examine it and learn about it, or you find something later. Like, that exploration and sense of excitement and wonder is so good, and that's what makes them so good. And then when you add the added degree of a randomizer, because it's all so well integrated that it doesn't break your game if you can actually just change everything up, like...
And the randomizer is basically randomizing where you find items. Is that right?
Every item is different than what it may actually appear. So like I just played a Resident Evil randomizer for Remake. And I think the first, you know how when you walk into the dining hall and there's the ink ribbon right there?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure when I opened it, it gave me, what did it give me? It gave me the crest to go outside. Nice. So like immediately I could have gone, not really, but I could have gone and put the crest in and gone to the garden and to the residence. Like it's just cool shit like that. Where I killed Lisa before I even got to the part in the underground, so she didn't stalk me because she was already dead.
Yeah,
it's cool shit like that.
It's so cool.
Yeah,
and that's
the discovery when you explore, like the beginning or like the first time I ever played it. It's like you're just wandering aimlessly, just finding shit. Like, well, eventually I'll need this. So I'll put this in my box, and I'll freaking, it's kind of just bumping into stuff, and then things start to make sense, and I love that. Yeah.
And
Sorry,
that's
John,
really.
I cut you off.
Oh no, it's cool. It's kind of what I was going to build off of. Is that like that's what's great about Resident Evil games. Your first playthrough is like a 6 to 10 hour playthrough, depending on the game. And you get to really dive in. You get the lore. You figure things out. It's escape room, whatever. It's all that. It's awesome. But Capcom was so smart that they built in the speedrun factor. Because I don't like. I know there was speedrunning and like competitive stuff in games before that, but I think that was like Resident Evil was really a turn because you get the ranking. So it's like, yeah, you can play this game for 6 to 8 hours and you get this full experience. But if you want to get that special feeling in your belly, you gotta beat it in under 2 hours with 3 saves. Like, and then you get a rocket launcher. It was like those kind of things were so cool. And then like, because I like we speed whatever you want to call it. We were doing speed runs on Resident Evil 3 back in '99. Before even knowing that internet speedrun forums and shit were there. It's like we did that for fun, and it made it so cool because it wasn't like certain games. I could see speedrunning Mario. It's more of a challenge to beat it in 10 minutes and just be like, oh look, I just ran really fast and jumped. Like, I think with Resident Evil, because there's those puzzle elements and that sense of like having to route things out, it's just I think speedrunning with that kind of style game and like Resident Evil is so much fun compared to other things. There's that kind of element to it. So you can sit down, have your slow play, and then you could like master this game.
Yeah, start getting more efficient, like grouping things like I was saying with certain items. It's like things that you can get ahead of time and just be like, dink, 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 done with that puzzle. Or like certain zombies that you just know, like, I ain't killing you. Like, I don't know. Yeah, just being more efficient is fun. And then also being rewarded at the end saying like, you're freaking cool. Awesome. That's Capcom in a nutshell anyways. Like all of their games have rankings and things like that. So it's like that's what's cool about them. They do show their personality throughout all their games, but like for some reason, yeah, with Resident Evil, sometimes they start to lose focus or something. But yeah, as far as I don't know if we're doing this ranking tier thing, but yeah, definitely RE1 a remake, and 2 and 3 are definitely the kings of in my world. Which is weird because like HD remake and Zero are pretty much the kind of the same game as far as like the same engine and like the way that it
Mhm.
looks and the way that it feels. As far as the game though, obviously like one beats that one. Having an extra person with you is kind of weird, but it is kind of cool with some of those puzzles where it's like, I'm gonna leave you here while I go do this thing and I'll unlock the door and then you can come again. But yeah, so RE2 remake, 3, and remake of 1 is definitely the top dogs in my list. But yeah, sorry, I'll hand it off to
Oh,
someone
right.
else.
And it's like it's kind of what we were talking about is that kind of division of it. It's like I mean, 4 is definitely a top tier game for me as well. And not I always talk about Veronica. I'll wait for a second, but like Zero, you mentioned, I actually really like Zero. There's a couple of problems with it, like the item detection is terrible, like fucking garbage, and the hook shot. But other than those two aspects of Zero, it's a good Resident Evil game. It follows the formula well, and it added that new uh, partner thing, and the partner AI in Zero is better than the partner AI in Five. Like that, you can hear shots fired in the distance, but like, like I liked Zero, and then like I think Veronica deserves to be in if not the top like second tier for me because it was neglected because it was on Dreamcast, and Sony bitch slapped it and said you're not Resident Evil 3. But like the mechanics of it were really cool, and like you got to be Claire again because I think some of the best Resident Evil games is the female protagonist. Is that Jill and Claire really did a lot for the franchise. As much as people like, I mean, Capcom thinks, and I think people like Chris. Um, people from what I've gathered from a majority of the like Resident Evil community is that you really gravitate towards Jill, and then even though a lot of people really like Leon, and I really like Leon, but canonically, Claire A is what happens. Claire A, Leon B, and it's like I don't know. I'd really like Claire. I think Claire was a great character, and I'm glad that I think she's the better Redfield, hands down. So it's like even when you play Veronica, her section is better than Chris's section because Chris is just doing cleanup, kind of like it intertwines a little bit. But I mean, Claire is the highlight of that game. So it's like I think Resident Evil does really well with the female protagonists, and those are the best games. And like Resident Evil 3, both remake and original, Jill was a fucking badass, and like there, I don't know, something about the female characters in those games like is just fucking awesome.
But that's a big horror trope thing, right? Like that checks out because horror movies are about the female protagonist, the final girl. Like that is a thing.
Yeah.
And so it's not unreasonable to think that the female protagonists end up being the better ones, like the more likable ones too. And I completely agree with you. I think that they are better characters than most of the male protagonists, except I do think Leon is amazing. But
Well, yeah, and we are
I
kind of groomed by a lot of the horror movies back in the day. It's always, yeah, like you're saying, it's like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. They're always a female, kind of like starting off as like not knowing what to do and then rising to the occasion to kill them.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me think of Nemesis in 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll reel this back in, but that that totally made me feel like an old school horror villain, especially the way that they brought in the music, they brought in the sound effects, and he's just like slowly walking towards you, like, oh shit. But anyways, sorry, continue.
I mean, yeah, like I said, I think that the top tier Resident Evil games are definitely 4, 2, and remake. I think that those are Resident Evil at their best. And I think you're right. I think it's like I think like a definitive list of actual ranking the Resident Evils would be really hard. I
Mm-hmm.
like this idea of like tiers or bubbles or something, like
Yeah.
some way to like group them feels really good to me because like I can easily say that that's the top tier group. And then there are ones that I think that could go into that second one. Like I do think Zero isn't as bad as I think people make it out to be. I think Revelations would be perfect in that second tier because I actually think Revelations is a good game for what it is, especially being made for a portable console. I would put the original Resident Evil 3 in that tier because I actually don't think that game holds up as well as
That's
some of
two.
the originals.
Yeah.
Like I think Resident Evil 2 original still holds up so well, but I don't think that Resident Evil 3. Actually, I put both Resident Evil 3s in that tier. And then obviously there. Oh, and then Resident Evil 7 too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that the worst games are pretty clear.
Yeah,
Like
they
6 is the worst. It is the worst. It is not good. 5 is hard because it is one that I grew up with and I kind of have a soft spot for. But even going back and playing it last week, I was telling John, like, it's rough. It is rough. Regardless of the AI, there are just there's some aspects to it that just are. It's just so linear, which is so not what it feels like to play a Resident Evil game. Even though technically those games are linear because there's only one path to do things, but it gives off this sense of exploration. Whereas 5, it's like you go from point A to point B. And so, yeah, I don't know. I know that there are a lot of games that I didn't mention in between, but I think that it's kind of like it's clear which ones are the top tier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like when I first started playing 8, I was really thinking it was top tier. Like I actually thought it was close to being in that top tier bubble. But the more I've played it, and then the more I played it the first time, it kind of still fell into probably that second tier where it's a good game and it was fun to replay. Like I think I've beaten it 5 times. So I must have liked it to a certain degree. But like it still isn't Resident Evil at its best.
I feel that because I'm like that too. Because I think 7 falls into tier 2 because it's not quite tier 1. 7 was good, but it's not tier 1. And in 8, I will say the first playthrough of 8 was a lot of fun. Every playthrough after, it loses its shine. So it sits in that 2. It's not in 6 territory. And like 5, I would even put above 6. Like, because 5 still has its moments. It's still there. Just because 6 is so terrible. Like, I'm going to try to at least get through the rest of the game, but it was just not fun. I just don't like it at all. But Village, like it has its moments, and like I said, the first half of the game, I really like playing that first half. Like I could put that hour and a half into it, just consistently and have fun with it. And that's I think why 3 sits well with me, especially remake, because the original 3 doesn't hold up as much as original 2, because I put original 2 in that top tier as well. But 3 remake is just so fun. I played it the other night on stream. It's like if you just want to screw around and complete a Resident Evil game in 2 hours and just have fun, Resident Evil 3 remake. It's like that's almost like the closest you can get to like a good arcade version of Resident Evil. Like okay, I can beat this in 2 hours or under 2 hours, and I'm just gonna go kill some fucking zombies, because it's not like Dead Rising to where it's arcadey in the sense it's like open world, but it's just like like there's that timing factor. It's like no, it's like fucking Resident Evil 3 is just fun to play.
I just think what's so hard about Resident Evil 3 for me is it is both in the original and the remake the game of unmet potential or like unfulfilled potential, where it's like they clearly could have gone somewhere and done something really great with it, and then they didn't, and they've done it twice now. The first time it makes sense that it didn't happen because, like you were saying earlier, a lot of the deals, all that stuff, it's really Resident Evil 2.5, but they needed to make it a mainline one. That makes sense. But then when you have your chance to re-go at it and really make a difference, and then also give us the tease of the beginning. Like, the beginning of Resident Evil 3, playing it, you're like, oh my god, they took RE2 remake, and they did great things. And then you actually get to the rest of it, and it was like, okay, Capcom, what the fuck?
I agree.
Like, and like, I don't think that 3 remake is a bad game. I don't. I just think that it is, once again, a product of unmet potential or unfulfilled potential and what it could have been. I
totally agree with that. Like, there's so much they could have made better with that game. But I have to always like defend 3 because people are like, man, 3 fucking sucked. It's like, no, 3 was really good. It could have been a lot better. Like, 3 was a solid 7.5, 8. Exactly. It could have been a 10. It could have been an easy 10, but it still sits at an 8. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like it is equal to what 3 was to original 2. Does that make sense? Like
it fits. Like
yeah. Because it's beautiful. Actually, like the cinematicness of it is like through the roof. Like the way that they introduce all the characters is awesome. The first person thing was really awesome in 3 remake. and being able to interact with certain things in the environment, which is kind of like 7 or whatever, where they start doing that a lot. You could like open the fridge and read different things. That was pretty awesome. Obviously, like bringing in Nemesis and introducing him again was pretty epic. Like you said, Jason, it's like this intro is freaking awesome. And then using the real life live action cutscene type stuff, that was weird to me. But of course, that's kind of their flavor from the first HD remake and the originals and stuff. But I don't know. I loved RE3, and it's always had a special spot in my heart from the original, so I can't really hate on it. So it's always in the top tier no matter what. Most of these other games I've watched John play, so whether it's through streaming or like Code Veronica, we just like sit up all night playing that thing, kind of just trading back and forth. So there's like memories attached to those, and I think that's why we love them so much too. You know, growing up in the '90s, these games were the shit, man. But yeah, the Gears of War people, the freaking Halo people, I don't know. Maybe they're just.
It's just like I get the being born in a different time and games are different, but also fuck you.
Yeah.
Like like Resident Evil, everything before 4 is just still better than anything that happened after. Like besides 2 remake, like
yeah. No, it's like
I just
if you were to get if I was to tell people to play 3 Resident Evil games, none of them would be 5, 6, or maybe even 7. I mean, maybe 7 would be in there now because I'm a modern gamer. But I mean, I'd be like, play 1 remake, play 2 remake, and you should probably play 4. 7 would probably be the 4th game to tell them to play. I'd tell them to play that before 3 because you're not getting a whole lot extra other than the dodge mechanic and seeing Jill again.
yeah.
But like, I'm telling you to start at 1 and 2. Play 1 and 2 first.
Yeah.
And then you play 4, and then you play 7. Like,
And I don't mean to keep dropping off 4 because that's a badass game. And when like whenever we like with the GameCube and when we got that game, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But I understand like trying to tell someone now that's used to these amazing graphics and mechanics, like just try it out. Just it's gonna be okay.
And 4 is hard because 4 is the most like what's being put out now. Like 4 is the like very similar to RE2 and RE3 remake. But then telling someone who has never played it to go back and play it and be like, by the way, you can't move and shoot. By the way, you have this terrible sway when you're aiming the gun. Like there are those aspects where it's like, yeah, you might play that and be like, why would you say that this is a good game? But there's so much more about 4 that holds up than I think people would realize and be able to appreciate now than when it came out. But like I'm playing it again right now and it's still fucking great.
yeah.
It's great.
And it's like, that's what I was saying earlier. It's like, even though I kind of shit on some of the stuff in 4, it's still a great game. Like, like the aiming is rough because now you have Resident Evil 2 remake and 3 remake where the aiming is fucking awesome. So going back, it's hard. But at the time, that fucking changed the game. And like there was other
laser pointer, like that was actually genius. Instead of it being a reticle and making you feel more immersed into the actual world of the game and that you needed to aim and not have a reticle, by having this laser, it was so smart.
And they probably knew that their aiming was a little shitty, so like, let's just give them a laser, so at least when they see it hit the person, they just have to pull a trigger.
It's the indicator, yeah.
But yeah, and then going back with like, you kind of have to train people of now to like the old. Could be like, okay, just sit with me, and I'll show you why this is badass. Because like even with my son, he's 9 years old now, and when I play these old games, it takes him a bit, but then once he sees it, he's into it, and he'll sit down and be like, oh, okay. Like, this is what you got to do, you know? So I think there's a little bit of training involved.
There's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Because, like, tank controls are hard. They were great and intuitive at the time, but that's the one thing, like, people have a hard time with 4 going back and playing now who haven't played it, is that 4 is over-the-shoulder tank controls, but you can aim. So
it was designed on a controller that only had one stick. Well, that's not true, but you had one movement stick. Like, that is what is different about 4 when you think about it. And that's why you couldn't move and shoot either, because how would you be able to control all the different axes and movement?
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, because it's hard. Some people pick up 4 who are used to games now, and they're like, this plays like garbage. It's like, No, you just have to learn the game. Because, I mean, that's the thing
No,
is
you
even...
just have a wrong opinion.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those things, because, like, even playing, if you play old school 2, or if you play HD Remake or 0, like, the tank controls, I play tank controls. I fucking hate the new scheme. Like, where it's auto run, and then with fixed camera angles, it doesn't work. I understand the advantage of it to where you could fake out zombies, but other than that one advantage, the new control scheme on HD Remake and 0 is fucking garbage. So it's like, I play that tank controls, and it puts me at a disadvantage, but I don't care because that's how it's fucking supposed to be played.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's just such a lazy argument. Like, the purpose behind tank controls too, like the cumbersome controls over your character, was a horror element added to the game because they couldn't do much at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they couldn't do crazy visuals like they do now to scare the shit out of you. So it's like, yes, the camera angles are there for a reason. The shitty controls are there for a reason. Like, just suck it up,
It
Buttercup.
makes
You're
you
gonna
like
love it.
your whole body move. You're like, just
Yeah.
move. It's like those dreams where you're stuck in quicksand or whatever. You're just like,
Yeah.
I can't get out.
It's like,
It's
it's a design choice, and it works well. Like, I don't know. Like, so it's one of those things, I know that's hard for people to go back to. And it takes me, because I mean, even when I started the marathon, like, going back and playing HD Remake in 0 took me a minute. Like, I was lucky enough to be able to do HD Remake in 0, do like practice runs to relearn the game, instead of just jumping straight in on stream and be like, oh, fucking, I gotta get used to tank controls again. But it takes a minute, because I play a lot of Resident Evil 2 Remake and a lot of Resident Evil 3 Remake, and I am very much in love with that control style, and it works for me. I know how to do shit. So then when you go back to tank controls, you're like, oh, I can't do these things anymore. So it's rough, but they're great games. And like me and Jason talk about, it's like HD Remake. I mean, you look at the GameCube era of Resident Evil games. HD Remake, one of the greatest Resident Evil games, if not the greatest. That, with like its argument between that and 2, like, that's the mecca. And then, I mean, Resident Evil 0, there's things that are wrong with it, but it's still a really good game. And then fucking Resident Evil 4 is a masterpiece too, and it changed how you did horror games. But like, those games looked really fucking good. Like, their HD upgrades, it's not like they did a whole, it's like, it's not a whole new remake. It's just, they made the things bigger. They up-resed it. Like, Resident Evil 4 on a GameCube still looks good. That was the best game of that era for any console. And that's the thing, is that the GameCube version of that game before the HD remake was the best version of that game. The PlayStation 2 version looked like garbage. The Xbox version looked like garbage, like, compared to the GameCube. So GameCube and Nintendo, hats off to them, made those games look fucking good, and they made it work on that system. So it's like, that's a whole nother kind of testament to those games. It's like, they still hold up now. Like, playing HD remake now still looks fucking good. Like, Resident Evil 4 holds up.
It's baffling that was created in what was it, 2004?
Almost 20 years ago.
I remember when you got that T-shirt, John. When you got the special edition T-shirt with the zombie dude, it's like, but yeah, it was amazing. Their environments, or the backdrops and whatnot, are just so awesome.
2002.
20 years, and that game is still better than some games that come out now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Weston was like shocked. I was like, this is Resident Evil. This is the remake of the original, because the original needed to be remade. But yeah, he was pretty impressed. I was like, what? Awesome.
But that's a testament to some of these games. Like, HD remake 20 years ago, still a great game. I mean, fucking Resident Evil 2 original. That game is still amazing. Like, I've dropped his name a bunch of times, Metrock. There's an emulator where you do, like, it's like a Dolphin emulator, whatever, but it has like an HD skin for Resident Evil 2 and 3, the original. It's like, it just cleans up the pixels, and that game looks great, and it plays great. That game came out in, what, 96? 97?
Yeah.
Because 3 was 98. So that game came out almost, like, not almost 30 years ago, but 2.5 decades ago. Still a great game. It holds up.
Birkin's design when you first encounter him and his eye just like opens up and it's like moving around. That's pretty groundbreaking shit for
Yeah,
back then, you know?
because other games that are like that are also on the greatest games of all time list, like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. Those games still hold up. They're a little rough around the edges because they came out 25, 26 years ago,
You
but
only
they
had
still hold up.
certain
But
amount of
it's you,
polygons. Hello, you
Yeah.
can only do so much.
and then you think about hardware limitations too. Like the thing that doesn't hold up well in Mario 64 is the camera, and that's because they they were figuring out how to manipulate a camera in a 3D space
It was
because
the
that
first to
wasn't
do it,
done
really.
yet.
Yeah.
And so they were figuring it out, and with what they did, they actually made it work pretty well. Yes, it got frustrating sometimes when it got caught on shit, but still, it it's a great game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
There's a reason why I bought it on the Switch not too
Yeah.
long ago. Like and I bought that collection for that game. Like, because I've never played Galaxy, and like Sunshine, I didn't finish. I bought that for Mario 64, and it's like because that was a great game. It defined 3D platformers, just like Ocarina of Time defined like action adventure, kind of that style of game. Is that every game after it emulated it? It's like, how do we be Zelda but be enough different that we don't get sued? Like, and that's what Resident Evil 2 kind of did. Resident Evil 1 and 2 did. It's like it sits on that list for a reason, is that those games are that fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yes, sir.
we're 2 hours in.
Well,
This is gonna be a two-parter, but
yeah, 2.5 close.
I guess we could wrap it up. Is there any other final thoughts? We probably missed a bunch of stuff, and I didn't shit on 6 as much as I thought I was going to. I'm excited to see what they do with Resident Evil, because I'll drop the thing. There is a fan remake of Veronica, so maybe that'll push Capcom, because that shit blew up like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it
Like,
looked awesome.
yeah, and like there's a lot of hype around it, and that kind of happened with 2. Is that there was a fan remake of 2, and they're like, we're doing that, so stop, but we'll give you a job. Like, so I'm hoping something similar happens with that, because it would be amazing to see Veronica in the Resident Evil 2 style. Be fucking awesome. But like, they have some potential with Rose, and it's like, do they do just cool horror games under the Resident Evil umbrella, pun intended, or like, do we kind of go some of that remake route? Because I mean, technically, if you remade HD remake, if you did another remake of the first game in the new RE engine, it'd be fucking amazing. It would change the game. Even though tank controls work so great for that game, like, imagine if they remade original.
Yeah, take
Just
$70. It's cool.
You just created the best game ever.
Yeah.
Like you have created the ultimate game of all time.
Yeah,
So-
it would actually put it up its dukes against RE2 remake.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really tough because then you're in a mansion, which I've always loved the mansion ambiance. So yeah,
I mean,
And it just like, once again, it lends the opportunity for the survival horror. It gives them the opportunity to make it scary again, like actually make you frightened around what is around the corner, but then also perfect some of the puzzle elements, perfect the actual combat of the game, because Resident Evil 1 obviously wasn't actually about fire or shooting at zombies. Like, it would just have so many cool elements that they could reintroduce and reformat, redo, kind of just have another take of this amazing game. And I don't see it going. I think that's a harder one to fuck up than what they're doing right, are not doing right now, with 4. Like, because 4 is so solid in what it is that the only thing that I think you could really change is the aiming and
you just clean up
walking.
mechanics.
Yeah, like cleaning that up will really just help that game so much, and then it's still going to be a 10 out of 10. But if you try to fuck up and change so many other aspects of it, you might lose some of the charm that everyone knows and loves of the game. And so
that was one of the things on our list, is what would you change and what would you add to an RE4 remake, and you kind of touched on that. It's pretty hard to take anything away, but making things better, obviously look better. maybe adding.
I just think that they've demonstrated that they can make everything flow. So I think if 4 ditch the chapters, which I don't think they would do chapters again,
Yeah.
but if they ditch the actual chapter breaks and made it flow a little bit more, I think that could really help it. And I think that the aiming and shooting is obviously something they'll add and it'll help it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things I don't want them to take away. I'm going to be devastated if they take away the melee. I think the melee is so good. It's cheesy. It's stupid. Yes, why would you shoot someone in the head and then kick him in the fucking face? I don't know, but it's so good. Don't touch it,
The
Capcom.
freaking roundhouse, like, what's up?
Or just suplex, like you literally go up to a monk in fucking robes and suplex him so that a giant thing pops out of his head. Like,
yeah. And
just add some more wrestling moves. Who knows?
Yeah, and it was great in 4. It got kind of stale in 5, and then it was terrible in 6.
Well, see, like, and that was one of the things why I liked 5 so much was the exploration and understanding of the different moves because it's a fighting game essentially at that point because there's different combinations that have you do different melee attacks. And so I thought that was really fun. But like, yes, 4 is the best version of it because it's ridiculous, it's stupid, it doesn't make much sense, but it was also limited in what you could do, and it wasn't, And so I was just streaming this this past week, and my strategy is shoot them in the head and then kick them because it's great crowd control. And then someone in my chat was like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can do that in this game." And they're like, "You're just kicking everyone." I was like, "I know."
That's how you do it.
That's what I do.
That's how you do it.
That was my strat. Shoot him in the knee, kick him in the head. Like
fucking Steven Seagal style. Just fucking do it. Break his
No.
arm. That'd be cool. Yeah, just bring in some more elements of that. Snap an arm, elbow. But no, yeah, that would be fun. I mean, I could see them if they're making it more realistic. They would have to like tone it down a notch, but that'd be pretty badass.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting to see where they can go because they have really gone back to their roots in a lot of the things. Because like in 8, it is the greatest hits, and then you've got the remakes of 2 and 3, and not 4. So there's those potentials, and you could really do some cool things. And like Resident Evil, as they're rebooting the movie series, they're adding. I mean, was it next month in July? They're dropping the Leon and Claire anime. Like there's potential to flesh out a lot of those characters that people love and actually go back to what you like. And there's still a ton of people who are like, do something with Claire. Because I guess she was in Revelations 2. I haven't played Revelations 2 yet. But it's one of those characters they never really capitalized on because people didn't get to play Code Veronica until later because it came out on Dreamcast. And then when it came out as Code Veronica X, no one cared because 4 was already out. And they're like, it's Resident Evil fucking 4. And it changed. It missed the mark. Or missed its time, kind of like. Which happened with a few games on Dreamcast. But yeah.
I mean, the formula changed too. So when you have people who got used to this new formula and like technically to a certain extent Resident Evil 4 putting Resident Evil on the map, then to tell them to be like, hey, play this one that was only released on a console that no one bought, and then you play it and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's just something different.
Yeah, just kind of a loss. That's sad.
Yeah. And then just going back to it real quick, the other thing that I would add to Resident Evil 4 Remake that isn't happening, Capcom, is if they can actually make it scarier. Like, if they can actually bring the horror elements back and actually, like, it's scary when you first play it. I like the original 4. There are some moments that it's like the guy in the castle, when he's chained up, you know he's gonna fucking break out, but you just don't know when. And then the moment it happens, it's terrifying. And so it's like, I want more opportunities for scary parts in 4 because I think then it once again becomes an 11 out of 10 game.
And that's the thing is that with the mechanics that they've perfected with 7, 2 remake and 3 remake, like, it makes the chainsaw guys way more daunting. It can make El Gante more daunting. And then even the chief. So if you had the chief of the village, the eyeball spider guy, he could have a bigger role in the village instead of just being like, oh, one cutscene and then you fight him. Is that he could almost be their tyrant nemesis, Mr. X guy. So like you have these systems in place now to make this game better by just adding little spices Don't take away a lot. Just clean up the mechanics, clean up the graphics, sprinkle a little spice. Because that's all you need to do.
Absolutely.
And you can expand certain zones so that they're a little bit more spacious or a little bit more, you can add more nooks and crannies into the environment.
Because that's the interactive, like what Jason was saying. Because the big thing about the chapters in those games is that's how you loaded the levels. And that's how the maps were done. But now, again, with that technology boost, you don't have to do that. Because like when you think about Resident Evil 2 and 7 and 3, and even 8, is that certain areas kind of deload to a certain extent and something else opens up. You don't need chapters. You don't need loading screens. So with that, you open up a little bit more of the Metroidvania kind of concept with that. But 8 showed that they're doing similar things to where it's like you're not going to load this place ever again, but new things open up here. But that element of technology is just cleaning up those little things and add a little spice.
Yeah, you can spice up the whole having the girl, what's her name, with you?
Ashley.
You could probably spice that up a little bit more.
Better partner AI than 5.
Yeah. I hear the best way to spice that up is there's a thing called a delete button.
Yeah. But I mean, even if you gave Ashley just a little bit more, I mean, because her section was kind of dumb, and then that's where Resident Evil they kind of run into things like the Sherry section is kind of dumb. The Ashley section's kind of dumb. The Chris section in 8 is dumb. Like, they throw sections at characters just to have them. I will say, I mean, Ada's section in 2 Remake isn't bad. But, I mean, if you could skip it after your first playthrough, I could see it. But there's a fun element to it. It's not the Sherry section. The hide-and-seek Sherry section is just so dumb the second time. Every time I play that section now, I'm just like, man, I gotta do this. I gotta wait for him to... Like, it's not hard. It's just like, the first time through, great. Every other time, just skip it. But...
And, like, I actually don't hate the Ashley aspects of 4. I think particularly her section where you play as her is not great because there's nothing fun about hiding from these things when you're not really hiding and then throwing lanterns at them.
Yeah.
But like her whole AI and protecting her, I don't think that's terrible, especially when you play the game, you know well enough that they give you so many opportunities for her to be safe, like besides the castle. But
yeah.
They give you so many opportunities to actually like effectively play the game without worrying about her too much, other than being like, "Okay, bitch, come on."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like she's not like usually that in that much danger. It just feels like it because it's like a little ball and chain. You're like, damn it, I have to freaking make sure you're okay, but it's not. Yeah, it's not that bad.
It's only the story beats where like you have to send her to crank the thing, or there's parts where she has to be a problem. Other than that, it's like just go hide in the trash. I'll be back.
Yes, exactly.
So that's not too bad. I mean, you can
just put it on your shoulder and you're just freaking barreling through guys.
But I will
just like give her a fucking knife.
Yeah.
Like I just it's those small things where it's just like I don't know.
Yeah, like it's just cleaning it up because I mean, if you just gave her a knife or being able to just hand her a weapon to where she can semi defend herself makes it better. To where it's
and
just
I would even think it was hilarious if you could give her a handgun or something and she misses 9 out of 10 shots.
Yeah, she doesn't have to be great.
That would even be funny and good for me because why would this random girl know how to shoot a gun effectively?
She actually shoots
go
you.
For it.
Fuck, what the
So like you could do something with it. Yeah, so it's like there's not a lot there that you can change because if you change too much, it will take away from it. So it's like just clean it up and just that's all it needs.
Sorry, I have to interrupt this because I'm about to piss. My bladder's about to explode.
Okay.
Be right back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just think with 4, it's almost scary that they're gonna touch it, but you're right. Just spice it up. Small things, small little things.
Exactly, and we've seen those steps in 8. Now that's why it goes back to it being a tech demo for 4.
Yes,
is that the treasures worked out? Everyone loved the Duke. We didn't even talk about the Duke.
I know.
Fuck, we love you, Duke. We love you, Duke.
Duke is great.
Duke is one of the best characters in the game,
great.
and the mystery of him at the end. We didn't talk about that. I can't believe I forgot about that. Is that there's like, what the fuck is the Duke? Not only is he like, because he's kind of grotesque looking, but it's like, He's just dealing with all this like mega whatever my seat bullshit. Like it's nothing. He's like, hey, Ethan Winters. Oh, I picked you up.
Yeah.
I know you're just some old dude. Like just chill in the back. See my meat? No, let's hang out.
Yeah.
Like the Duke was so cool. But
He was a cool character.
the merchant worked, the money worked, the treasures worked, the upgrading worked. Like all the elements of Resident Evil 4 that they were testing out worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even the Moreau part, it's like having the big fish in that kind of area.
Yeah.
It worked. I mean, I'd like to see them execute it better if they redid 4, but it's not like it was broken. Like,
And like really the lake section of 4 is so small.
it is.
Like
It's just the one boss fight, basically.
yeah.
And then
And that they should rework that.
yeah. So I mean, but I mean they showed that kind of well enough with Moreau, as I think.
Yeah.
So it's like you could change up that boss just a little bit to make it more of a just a better boss fight.
I agree.
But I mean, because even the boat mechanics work the same as 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't change anything with your speedboat. So I think there's those things that are laying down the groundwork for
Yeah.
4 that will work. So Reverse, that's such an interesting thing because they kind of jumped the shark with that to where they're like, oh yeah, we're going to release this game that you don't want with the game, kind of like what we did with Resistance. But then like, oh shit, it's not ready yet.
Well, and I think response to it wasn't great either.
Yeah, it looked fun. I watched a couple people play a few rounds. Like, it's just a 6-on-6 shoot 'em up arena game. It's nothing great. I mean, I enjoyed Resistance. I stopped playing it. I had other things to do than keep playing it. But I mean, for the concept of what it was and being in an RE engine, being a Resident Evil game, I think they kind of nailed a version of a game like that. Like, and we'll see how. I mean, the new Dead by Daylight stuff is coming out in the next week or so, and I think that translates over well to that game. But without having to copy that game, Resistance did well. I mean, it's not what we asked for, but it's not a fucking terrible game. It's still better than 6. Like, so I don't know. We'll see about Reverse. I'm open to it. It's one of those things where I think if you had 10 minutes before you had to go somewhere and you wanted to play a Resident Evil kind of style game, you could throw on Reverse and play a round. Because they're only like 10-minute rounds, or like 6-minute rounds. Like, it is really just, hey, just fuck around with our characters. Like,
Yeah, that's the one thing that kind of bugged me about it, is that it kind of like loses its, or it makes these characters kind of stupid. You know, it just doesn't let them be in their element and stay there. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of like
It's
makes
just
them
a weird arcadey thing that I don't know.
I mean,
I was gonna say I
but
feel like it's something that Japan does, but I actually don't think I can just say like it's a Japanese thing. I just think it was like a weird tack on, and I think what had happened is they didn't have an additional mode, or what's strange about 8, and I talked about this with someone, is there's no DLC. Like this
Yeah.
game is not getting DLC. I'm almost certain of it. Like 8 is done, and so I think that they wanted to tack on Reverse to kind of remedy the fact that there's nothing else that's going to be added to Village, and so it feels off and weird and something that doesn't belong. But at the same time, it's like this is what they do. I don't know.
Yeah, because that was the thing with Resistance with 3, is that they're like, we're not doing anything else. Like 3 is done. Here's Resistance. And then I wouldn't be surprised also if they started Resistance. I mean, if they started REverse before they decided to do Mercenaries within 8.
That's what I was gonna say too. Is I think that Mercenaries, especially after you've played it, you could tell that it's kind of just
It's
a
throw
tacked on
together.
mode. Like every other Mercenaries game has had, or every other Mercenaries in every other game has had unique maps or unique changes to maps. And in 8 or in Village, it is just taken from exact locations from the game. No change in the design of it whatsoever. and you're just killing enemies and reaching a goal, which is also different from Mercenaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they would do good. I mean, if they really wanted to capitalize, they would make a. I mean, they could do a DLC for all the lords, but Lady Dimitrescu and really Heisenberg, even though I'd much rather see a Donna DLC. But like, if you do a Lady D DLC, that's printing money. Like, the thirst for her is still real. I guess people are saying it's over now because there's like the Samsung digital assistant girl or something. That Lady D is old news. That was this last week. I guess Samsung came out with a new, like,
Alexa
digital,
thing?
like, anime girl thing.
Oh.
So people are thirsting over her now. Lady D's old news, but they just make Lady D DLC, and that shit will pop.
Yep.
So, I mean, I can see that to where they're done with 8, because I think they're working on 4, and I think they've already started on 9, and they're still trying to figure out what to do.
Well, and I'm sure that anything 8 DLC related potentially fell to the wayside when 4's original development
Tanked.
ended. Yeah, when you have to scrap it and start from scratch. And I'm pretty sure that the people who made RE2 Remake are the same studio that did 8. And so that's why when it surprised me if they were like, cut any DLC that we had for Village. We're gonna work on Resident Evil 4.
Like, you guys, your job has changed now.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I'm not certain. We could get surprised where Capcom's like, psych, we have extra stuff for Village, but I just feel like there's no point in Village that it would make sense to have any DLC. Whereas in 7, the DLC felt very purposeful. For the most part, it felt very purposeful.
Yeah, because I think the only reason for DLC in 8 would be to capitalize on money. And, I mean, because prequel, like, throwback DLCs would be cool. To be like, oh, this is early Lady D. Or, like, this is how Donna grew the banana weed and figured out it was all trippy as fuck. Or, like, this is, like, Heisenberg when he first started making the fucking crazy sawdust or whatever the fuck. Like, you could do something cool, but there's no way you could bring another, like, protagonist in. Is that it'd be a whole different kind of setup DLC. Is that you'd be playing probably as Lady D or Donna or something like that. Because it'd be weird. It's like, who you're just going to drop in fucking one of the villagers you killed in the beginning? Or like, because there was also, I'm going to say this because I forgot to say it earlier with 8, like, where the fuck are they getting all these people? Because, I mean, it happens a lot in Resident Evil games, but it's like, oh, it's this isolated village, there's not that many people, but then there's a factory of fucking dead people, like, for him to
700 lichens.
Yeah, there's 700 lichens, there's all these dudes there's conveyor belts, multiple conveyor belts, and then a whole pit of dead bodies. Like, where the fuck are they getting these people? It's like the population of Romania. Like, so there's that. I forgot about that. But so I mean that could be part of the DLC. You just have
you just
people
want
farm
some random body that gets abducted and you're having to escape or something. Yeah.
So, but I mean, they can also do with the chick in the basement of the
maiden demo. Like,
yeah, because it's like you could tell those stories of like people within the village or something. So I mean, you could do something like that.
And at the end, they're just like having to turn, get injected or something. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we covered a good amount. I mean, there's always more we could talk about. I mean, 2 hours 45 minutes ish in, we could still talk for about another 2.5 hours. So I guess we could wrap it up. Thank you again, Jason, for coming and hanging out. You can check him out on Twitch at or twitch.tv/YesONA, and same thing on Twitter. You can check out me and Randy on Twitter, because you have the new special Is It Dead Yet one too, right?
Is It Dead Yet, Randy? Yeah.
Yeah, because then
I'll put all the social medias on the screen too, but John, you can continue.
Yeah, so I mean, you can follow us on the Twitters, or you can follow us on Instagram, or you can check us out over on Twitch. We stream a lot of different content. And we will talk about Resident Evil again. I mean, we might even do it in a couple of weeks, because who knows, Capcom might announce something next week or the week after at E3, whichever it is. So come back, say hi, follow, check out Jason doing his thing. We love you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for spending 2.5 hours of Resident Evil time with us.